I lost my job and, just 1 week later, signed a $25 million contract. But when I went to share the news with my wife, I found her kissing the very boss who had destroyed my career. Her family said it was all my fault, and days later they mocked me in front of everyone. Until they saw who was standing by my side, and the lover screamed a sentence that completely gave him away. My name is Adrian Reyes, I'm 34 years old, and I've reached a point where life decided to turn into a cruel comedy, directed exclusively at me. To understand how I got here, we have to go back 7 days. Exactly 1 week earlier, I was sitting in the corner office of Carter Delgado and Harry Sonk. Carter had an ego so large it probably required a special chair to support it. He fired me with the coldness of someone tossing an unnecessary piece of paper into the trash, lounging in his luxurious leather chair while delivering a corporate speech about cuts and restructuring. Yeah, right. The truth was very different. My artificial intelligence system for logistics was making the outdated methods he considered untouchable look ridiculous. He couldn't stand that my project was advancing further than his obsolete vision of the company. Still, there I was, listening to him say, "It's nothing personal, Adrian," without even looking up from his screen. I worked tirelessly for them for 3 years, sacrificing weekends, family gatherings, and hours of sleep. I practically lived in that building, like a corporate hermit who spent more time in front of a keyboard than with his own wife. I walked out of the building carrying the classic brown box of the fired employee, my favorite mug, a few pens I wasn't sure still worked, and a nearly dead plant ruined by the fluorescent lighting Harrison Tech considered appropriate. My dignity was left behind on the sidewalk along with the box, but life, with its twisted sense of humor, had an unexpected turn waiting for me. 1 week after my dismissal, I was standing in the luxurious marble lobby of Matt Fire Corporation, shaking hands with Jordan Cortez, the company's CEO, considered a prodigy in the healthcare sector. He welcomed me as if he were handing me the future on a silver platter. I signed a $25 million contract for the exact same project Harrison Tech had labeled useless. Irony at its finest. The company that fired me citing budget issues was now desperate to obtain my technology, without ever admitting their mistake. They wanted to do it through Matt Fire. Jordan, adjusting his outrageously expensive suit with complete ease, told me, "Adrian, what you created isn't just innovative, it's transformative. We don't need Harry Sonka's approval to change the game." Overnight, I went from being an unemployed man with a dying plant to a millionaire with a brilliant future. I left the meeting with the contract tucked into my briefcase like a nuclear treasure. I walked home with my head buzzing with excitement, thinking about Marisol, my wife, and how happy she would be to hear the news. I even imagined buying an expensive bottle of champagne, along with the strawberries she loved so much. I was ready to surprise her, to tell her that everything we had dreamed of was much closer than we ever imagined. As I opened the door, I rehearsed the perfect line in my head. "Honey, I know last week was terrible, but today everything changed." What I found in our bedroom, however, made everything collapse. Marisol was on our bed, wrapped in the arms of and kissing Carter Delgado, the same man who had destroyed my career. There were no gasps, apologies, or attempts to hide the obvious. They stayed still, as if I had interrupted something as trivial as a TV show. I dropped the folder, and the documents for the $25 million deal scattered across the floor, mixing with dust and lint. It was like watching my achievements turn into trash in a matter of seconds. Marisol looked at me, and what I saw was worse than betrayal. There was no guilt or shame, only annoyance, as if I were an unnecessary inconvenience. Carter, meanwhile, adjusted himself arrogantly, as if seated on a throne, and smiled smugly. "You should have seen it coming," he said, in the same condescending tone he had always used with me. That's when I understood. My wife and my former boss had decided to destroy my world at the same time, as part of a perfectly coordinated plan. What they didn't know was that while they were plotting their little romance, I was signing the contract that would bring them to their knees. In the middle of that absurd scene, I could only think of one thing. The contract, my $25 million revenge. There are days when you think you've hit rock bottom, and even then life decides to challenge you with a, "Hold this for a moment." That was exactly my Tuesday morning, courtesy of the endless spectacle known as the Navarro family. At 8:47 a.m., while staring at my phone as if it could teleport me to a reality where my wife wasn't sleeping with my ex-boss, I received the call. Henry Navarro's voice came through the speaker with the warmth of a tax audit. "Adrian, you need to come to the house. We need to talk about this situation." Situation. Not adultery, not betrayal, not the total collapse of my marriage. Just a situation, as if it were a leaky pipe or a wrongly issued fine. The Navarros were always experts at disguising reality, so it matched their fine emotional porcelain. With my stomach in knots, I drove my old Honda Civic to the mansion in Cherry Hills Village. It felt like entering enemy territory, and the place confirmed it. 8 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, and so much marble a Roman emperor would have cried with envy. The driveway was longer than the street where I grew up, lined with hedges so meticulously maintained they probably cost more than my annual salary at Harrison Tech. I parked between Henry's Bentley and Patricia Navarro's Mercedes. My Honda looked like a rusty paperclip abandoned between 2 luxury watches. If their goal was to remind me that I didn't belong there, they succeeded effortlessly. Before I could knock, the door opened. Elena, the housekeeper, looked at me with a mix of pity and solidarity. She had always treated me kindly, perhaps because she understood what it meant to work just to survive. "They're in the library," she whispered, as if announcing a funeral. And, thinking about it, she wasn't far from the truth. The library, of course. Nothing like having your life destroyed surrounded by books no one has ever read. Henry was sitting with a glass of bourbon in his hand at 10 in the morning, trying to look like a southern gentleman. Patricia, beside him, nervously toyed with her pearl necklace, dressed in an outfit so expensive that any normal person would need a loan to afford it. "Adrian," Henry said without standing up, pointing to a chair. "Sit down." No. I chose to remain standing. Sitting would have meant surrendering, like obeying a command meant for a well-trained pet. "Let me guess," I said, crossing my arms. "You called me here to explain why your daughter is sleeping with my boss in my own bed. This should be interesting." Patricia's face tightened as if she had bitten into a lemon coated in hypocrisy. "How dare you speak about Marisol like that? She deserves something better than what you gave her." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Better than love, respect, and 3 years of my life? Or are you referring to the $25 million contract I signed a week ago? Because that also counts as giving something. Henry's glass froze halfway to his mouth. What contract? There it was, the truth. They knew nothing. Marisol hadn't even bothered to tell them while she was busy organizing her affair with Carter Delgado. "A contract that makes me someone who earns more in a year than Carter does," I replied, watching their faces as if witnessing a masterclass in shock and confusion. Patricia recovered quickly, like a politician in the middle of a crisis. "Money doesn't make you a man, Adrian. You were never enough for my daughter. Carter is a real provider. He has class. He has lineage." Lineage. She spoke as if they were breeding racehorses, not raising people. "A provider?" I shot back. "The man who fired me because my success bothered him? That's the man she prefers." Henry slammed his hand on the table. "Watch your tone, boy. You're in our house." I was 34 years old, with a freshly signed multi-million-dollar contract, and still this fossil was calling me boy. The contempt was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "You're right," I said coldly. "I'm in the house where they raised a woman who treats marriage vows as mere suggestions, where loyalty is optional and integrity is a luxury reserved for the poor." Then I heard the sound of heels. Marisol entered as if she were walking down the runway at a gala, and she wasn't alone. Behind her appeared Carter Delgado, his hand resting on the small of her back, staking his claim without shame. The emotional impact was immediate. Marisol was wearing an expensive, provocative dress, almost celebratory. Her smile was sharp. Carter wore that casually elegant clothing that costs more than a used car. His hand on her wasn't just possessive, it was a direct message to me. "Adrian," she said with feigned surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." My parents thought we should talk about your recent career change. I stared at her. For a second, I saw the real Marisol, the one who had planned all of this long ago. My new job as Carter's assistant? I replied. Though I suppose you've now been promoted from wife to mistress, or trophy. Silence fell. Patricia looked like she couldn't breathe. Henry seemed on the verge of exploding. Carter, on the other hand, smiled. Congratulations, Adrian, he said. You finally figured it out. It only took you 3 years. In that moment, I knew. This hadn't been a mistake or a reckless affair. Everyone was involved. It had been a plan to humiliate me, and I never saw it coming. I walked toward the door. You know what? I said without looking back. You deserve each other. That very night, I packed a bag and moved into an old apartment on the outskirts of Denver. Cracked walls, a kitchen worthy of a horror movie, but at least it was mine. There, in that miserable place, I promised myself I wasn't going to lose. Rock bottom has a particular kind of acoustics. Every thought echoes back with brutal clarity. Especially that voice repeating, "So what are you going to do now, genius?" I spent 48 hours sprawled among boxes, surviving on cheap Chinese food and self-pity, until my phone vibrated. The name on the screen froze me in place. Sophia Kim. I hadn't heard from her in years, and honestly, she was the only person in the world I truly wanted to answer at that moment. Sophia and I met in college, bonded by endless nights decoding software and by our shared disdain for computer science professors who thought they were gods of technology. She was the kind of person who could spot a bug in seconds, crush your ego with one sharp sentence, and still make you laugh. As soon as she heard my voice, she blurted out without filter. You sound like you've been reheated in a microwave. Tell me you're at least not in your underwear eating cereal. I looked down at my pajama pants and the container of Chinese food I was holding like it was my only friend. Close, I admitted. It's Chinese food, and technically I am wearing pants. Oh my God, you're a disaster, she muttered. Get dressed. I'm coming over, and we're going to face this like adults. And for the love of everything, tell me you've showered in the last 24 hours. I hadn't. But Sophia always had that effect on me. Even when I felt like garbage, she managed to push me to try to be a decent version of myself. When she arrived an hour later, I had managed to find a clean t-shirt and run a comb through my hair. Given my emotional state, that was the equivalent of climbing a mountain. She came in with 2 coffees from that overpriced cafe downtown and surveyed the chaos around her. Dirty clothes, open boxes, cables everywhere. I've seen worse scenes, she commented. Remember when Tommy Salazar had a breakdown during finals? His apartment looked like a pizzeria after an explosion. Thanks for the morale boost, I said, accepting the coffee as if it were liquid salvation. She dropped onto the couch, which groaned as if it were about to fall apart, and looked at me with that expression she used whenever a professor said something brilliantly stupid. All right, she said. Let it all out. I want the full version, not the edited story you probably told your mom. So I did. I told her everything, the firing, the multi-million-dollar contract, Marisol and Carter destroying my life in my own bed, the humiliation at the Navarro mansion. She listened without interrupting, storing every detail for later. When I finished speaking, Sophia leaned back, crossed her arms, and adopted that posture I knew well from our college years. It was the same one that always preceded a comment capable of changing your life, or destroying your self-esteem. Sometimes both at once. Do you know what your problem is, Adrian? She said as she sipped her coffee, as if dispensing ancient wisdom. You're acting like a victim when you should be acting like a predator. And what exactly is that supposed to mean? I asked. That they underestimated you, she replied without hesitation. And that's where they made their first mistake. Her eyes gleamed with that dangerous spark I remembered from the time she figured out how to hack the campus vending machines. Marisol, Carter, her spoiled parents, they all think you're going to disappear in pieces. They have no idea what you're really capable of. I let out a bitter laugh. Capable of what? My wife is sleeping with my ex-boss, her parents treat me worse than an insect, and I'm living in an apartment that makes a college dorm look like a five-star hotel. What exactly am I supposed to do? Sophia set her cup down on the table and leaned toward me with the same intensity she used when explaining a brilliant algorithm. You just signed a $25 million contract, genius. You have resources, you have influence, and most importantly, you have me now. And what exactly does that mean? That since we graduated, I've been running a consulting firm specializing in corporate espionage. You're a corporate spy? I prefer the term business forensic analyst, but yes, she smiled. Basically, I'm a shark when I smell blood. And I promise you, Carter Delgado and his circle of traitors have left more tracks than Hansel and Gretel. What kind of tracks? The kind that can end in fraud charges, if we're lucky. But first, we need solid legal defense. Someone who plays hardball with country club types. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her contacts. I know the right guy. Victor Sandoval, the coldest, most ruthless lawyer in Denver. That man eats corrupt millionaires for breakfast. Sophia, I can't afford someone like that. Enough drama. It's not an expense, it's an investment. And when we're done with Carter and Company, they'll be the ones paying the bill. Before I could protest, she was already dialing. Her posture shifted, her voice turned sharp and professional. In seconds, she looked capable of running a corporate merger or negotiating an international treaty. Victor, it's Sophia Kim. I've got the perfect case for you. Corporate fraud, adultery, conspiracy, and a group of rich idiots who think they're untouchable. Yes, it's going to be fun. She hung up with a satisfied smile. Done. Phase 1 complete. Phase 1 of what? Of making Carter Delgado and your unfaithful wife regret the day they decided to destroy Adrian Reyes. She stood up and surveyed my apartment with a mix of pity and approval. You know what? This place is perfect. Perfect for what? For staying off the radar while we build your case. They think you're finished, hiding in a depressing hole. While they get comfortable, you'll prepare a legal strike that's going to hit them like a freight train. And then I felt something I hadn't experienced in days. Hope. Not the naive kind that says everything will be fine, but a cold, strategic hope, the kind that comes when you start to see a way back. A path that involved making everyone who humiliated me pay for every last second. Sophia smiled, and for the first time since I found Marisol with Carter, I smiled for real too. Excellent, she said as she headed for the door. Because starting tomorrow, we play for real. And trust me, Adrian, these people have no idea what they've just unleashed. I watched her leave, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that hitting rock bottom wasn't the end of my story. It was the exact point from which I could build something stronger, bigger, and undoubtedly more dangerous than Carter Delgado or the Navarro family could ever imagine. 3 days after that strategy meeting with Sophia Kim, I found something in my mailbox that was anything but a pleasant surprise. An invitation designed to disguise a public execution as a social event. The paper, an pretentious cream color with gold lettering, screamed we have money and absolutely no taste. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Marisol and Carter Delgado. The text was written as if announcing the merger of two massive corporations, not the officialization of an affair. The event would take place Saturday night at the Navarro mansion, with a dress code, cocktail attire. The real translation was simple. Come watch us humiliate Adrian live, and make sure you look good while doing it. The sensible thing would have been to tear up the card and do literally anything less miserable. But common sense had been offline since the day I found my wife kissing my ex-boss in our own bed. So there I was, Saturday at 8 in the evening, standing in front of the massive gates of the Navarro mansion, wearing my best suit, which honestly looked like a clearance rack purchase compared to everyone else's. My old Honda Civic wheezed into the valet area. The young attendant in the bow tie looked at it as if I had handed him radioactive material. "Will it be here long, sir?" he asked with politeness, barely masking his wish that I'd leave. "As long as necessary," I replied. handing over the keys and walking toward the entrance with the best imitation of "I belong here" that I could manage. That night, fake confidence and I were an inseparable team. The garden looked like a movie set depicting how the rich celebrate. Lights hanging from every tree, ice sculptures that cost more than my rent, and immaculate waiters serving champagne whose price per bottle exceeded a car payment. The moment I crossed the front door, I felt like I had entered a lion's cage wearing a suit made of meat. The foyer was filled with Denver's elite: doctors, lawyers, business owners, and members of the exclusive club of We Wipe Our Tears with $100 bills. They laughed, chatted, and pretended to care about which universities other people's children would attend. And there I was, right in the middle of it all, waiting for the exact moment to return every single humiliation. But the moment I crossed the entrance, eyes turned toward me as if I had tracked mud across a white carpet. The whispers started immediately. "That's the husband, right? Poor guy, he actually showed up. I heard he got fired. Marisol really traded up." A charming group. They had elevated gossip to an art form, and that night I was the centerpiece of the exhibit. I took a glass of champagne from a waiter's tray. If they were going to talk about me, I might as well drink their absurdly expensive alcohol while they did. I stayed near the back of the room, in a spot where I could observe everything without becoming an even bigger part of the spectacle. The drink literally tasted like liquid gold, and probably cost about the same. Then I saw them. Marisol was standing by the marble fireplace, surrounded by guests, wearing an emerald green dress that screamed "I'm exclusive and worth every cent someone will pay for me." She radiated that kind of happiness that can only be born from publicly humiliating someone else. Around her neck hung a diamond necklace that flashed with every movement, like a disco ball made entirely of ego. At her side, like just another accessory, was Carter Delgado. His hand rested firmly on her waist, marking his territory. He wore a suit that had clearly been tailored by Italian artisans and financed through a combination of loans and arrogance. His smug expression sparked a visceral urge in me to want to rearrange his face. The crowd savored every second. For them, a good scandal was as nourishing as their constant need to feel morally superior. Marisol soaked up the attention like sunlight, making sure no one missed a single detail of her victory. That was when she saw me. Our eyes met, and for a moment I thought I detected something different in her gaze. It wasn't guilt. Marisol didn't know that emotion. Maybe it was just surprise that I had the nerve to show up. She leaned toward Carter and whispered something to him. He turned his head and gave me the same condescending smile he used when we worked together. Then Marisol raised her glass and gently tapped it with a knife. The sound cut through the room like a bell, imposing absolute silence. All eyes turned to her, as if she were about to announce a groundbreaking discovery. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," she said with that artificial sweetness she had perfected since her sorority days. "Carter and I are so happy to have you here to celebrate this new chapter of our lives." A new chapter. As if our 3 years of marriage had been nothing more than a disposable draft. "I know some of you may be wondering about the timing of this engagement," she continued, scanning the room until her gaze landed on me again, "but life sometimes shows you, unexpectedly, what you truly deserve." I felt my jaw tighten. "Carter has shown me what it means to be with a real partner," she went on, "someone who can offer support not only financially, but emotionally and intellectually as well." The guests murmured in approval. I clenched my teeth so hard I thought they might crack. I never imagined someone could go this far, but there she was, turning her own engagement party into a stage to mock me in front of half of Denver's social circle, doing it with almost surgical precision. "To Carter," she said, lifting her glass like the heroine of a movie. "My future, my partner, my true success." The room erupted in applause and toasts, as if they had all rehearsed that humiliation. I stood frozen, feeling every cheer land on me like a carefully calculated blow. But Marisol wasn't done yet. Carter stepped forward, wrapped an arm around her possessively, and raised his own glass. "And to moving forward," he proclaimed in that confident tone he used to fake authority, "to leaving behind those who can't keep up with our level, and to building something worthy of the future we deserve." Then he looked directly at me. His smile turned predatory. Adrian was just a man who couldn't keep pace. The laughter that followed was harsh, like metal scraping against glass. These so-called professionals, wrapped in tailored suits, laughed while sipping champagne that cost more than many families' monthly budgets. It was a high school scene, except this time, the bullies drove cars worth more than a house. I stood there alone, fists clenched inside my pockets, nails digging into my palms. They had planned this humiliation. They invited me solely to enjoy my fall. And I was forced to endure them celebrating the destruction of my life. That was when someone stepped up beside me. I didn't need to look to feel the atmosphere change. The murmuring died instantly, and the silence grew so thick you could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. I turned my head slightly. I recognized the silhouette before my mind fully processed that he was really there. The crowd recognized him too. Frantic whispers spread, mouths fell open, eyes widened in disbelief. Carter's face went from smugness to absolute terror in seconds. His glass trembled, and he barely managed to stammer. "My God, it's him." The scene felt like something out of a movie. One of those moments where the hero is about to be annihilated and suddenly the cavalry arrives. But this wasn't cinema. It was real. And it was infinitely more satisfying. Standing beside me was Jordan Cortez. If that name doesn't sound familiar, it's because you've been living under a rock, or you've never paid attention to the world of medical technology. Jordan was the perfect combination of obsessive visionary and pragmatic genius. He didn't build phones, he designed systems capable of completely transforming how a hospital operates. Forbes had put him on its cover the previous year with the headline "The Man Who Fixed Modern Healthcare." In person, he was even more imposing, not because of his height, but because of his presence. He made everyone else look like supporting characters. His suit probably cost more than some luxury cars, yet he wore it with the ease of someone in everyday clothes. And he was there, beside me. The strange part, and what made everything even more surreal, was that Jordan was supposed to be in Singapore, closing an international deal the financial media had been covering for weeks. Seeing him there, at the Navarro mansion, was like watching a unicorn land in the middle of Denver. Carter's face turned as pale as the statues in the room, and the tremor in his hand threatened to shatter the glass he was holding. "Mr. Cortez," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know you were in town." Jordan looked at him with a smile so sharp even a shark would have applauded it. "Delgado," he replied, projecting his voice effortlessly. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." The guests froze. Denver's most arrogant elite had never imagined someone like Jordan would show up unannounced, much less at a party whose primary purpose had been to humiliate Marisol's ex-husband. Marisol, for her part, recovered faster than her fiancé. She walked toward him with a smile perfectly rehearsed from her beauty pageant years. "Mr. Cortez, what a pleasant surprise. I'm Marisol Navarro, soon to be Marisol Delgado." "I see," he replied, shaking her hand politely, though with an edge that was hard to describe. "Congratulations on the change." The word change sounded like a joke disguised as courtesy. I had to suppress a laugh. Jordan then turned to me and extended his hand in a way that left no room for doubt. It was a public, deliberate, calculated gesture. "Adrian, I'm glad to find you here," he said firmly. "We have a lot to celebrate." The murmur in the room turned into a collective gasp. The man who minutes earlier had been the object of mockery was now the absolute center of attention. It was almost amusing to watch everyone scramble to recalibrate their perceptions. That was when Henry Navarro, Marisol's father, pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with urgency. "Mr. Cortez, what an honor to have you here. I'm Henry Navarro, Marisol's father. If we had known you were coming, we would have treated Adrian Reyes with more respect." "I know," Jordan interrupted, his voice soft but sharp as a scalpel. The silence was so complete that one could have performed open-heart surgery without distraction. Henry opened and closed his mouth, unable to form a word, while Patricia Navarro clutched her pearl necklace as if it might protect her. Jordan continued, his calm tone making every word land like a hammer. "What you may not know is that Adrian isn't here as just another guest. He's my partner. The contract we signed last week, for 25 million, is only the beginning." 25 million. The number echoed like a gunshot. The room erupted into whispers, a wave of murmurs moving like a swarm. It was the kind of scandal they enjoyed more than any caviar or champagne. Carter looked like he was about to faint. His complexion shifted from pale to greenish as he took a small step back, as if searching for an exit. 25 million, in investment, he stammered. Initially, Jordan clarified without losing his composure. The medical logistics platform Adrian is developing will completely transform the supply chain across North America. We're projecting a multi-billion-dollar market impact. The room was hypnotized. Some guests even leaned toward me, trying to catch every detail. Marisol's smile began to crack. The mask could no longer hold. "Adrian never mentioned any contract," she said, trying to sound casual. "Probably because he doesn't boast about his achievements," Jordan replied. "Unlike others." The jab at Carter was immediate and unmistakable. A few guests even smiled. Then Patricia Navarro, still stiff as a statue, interjected. "There must be some mistake, Mr. Cortez. Adrian was fired by Harry Sonk. He lives in a terrible apartment." "By choice," Jordan interrupted, without raising his voice, but ending the conversation with the force of an invisible slammed door. Sometimes truly successful people prefer to keep a low profile while they build their empires. That perfectly described my current situation. Carter Delgado finally found his voice again, though none of his earlier arrogance remained. "But the contract with Harrison Tech, we were supposed to license your technology through our partnership," he stammered, as if the ground had shifted beneath him. Jordan raised an eyebrow with an expression of studied surprise. "How curious," he said calmly. "Because as far as I'm aware, the technology belongs solely to Adrian. Any licensing would have to be negotiated directly with him." Understanding hit Carter like a speeding train. In seconds, he realized he hadn't just lost my technology by firing me. He had handed it straight to the very company Harrison Tech had been begging for a partnership with for months. Jordan took a small step forward, savoring every second. "In fact," he continued, "Adrian and I are considering expanding our collaboration. We're always looking for innovative companies, though we're very selective about the character and practices we support." The message was subtle and devastating. Jordan Cortez had the power to sink or elevate companies with a single phone call, and he had just made it clear that Harry Sonk was not a desirable partner. The murmuring grew like the warning of a storm. The sharks were already circling. In barely 10 minutes, Carter Delgado and Marisol went from being the golden couple of the event to a spectacle worthy of pity. Jordan glanced at his watch, probably worth more than most houses in the country, and turned to me. "Adrian, we talked about that potential expansion. I believe we agreed on an early meeting tomorrow." I found my voice for the first time since his arrival. "Yes. Let's go." As we headed for the exit, Jordan turned once more toward the crowd and dropped the final line like a definitive seal. "Enjoy the rest of the evening. It will undoubtedly be unforgettable." The last thing I saw as I walked out was Carter, frozen in the middle of the room, still holding his glass as if he didn't know what to do with it, his face that of a man watching everything he thought he controlled collapse in real time. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But Sophia Kim didn't seem to share that philosophy. She served hers boiling hot, and accompanied by a "let's destroy them completely." It was Monday morning, barely 2 days later. After the monumental disaster Jordan had caused at Carter and Marisol's engagement, I found myself sitting in Victor Sandoval's office, feeling like a character caught somewhere between victim and strategist in a legal thriller. Victor's office looked like it had been pulled straight from a luxury magazine, floor-to-ceiling windows with a panoramic view of the city, leather furniture that cost more than my car, and shelves packed with law books aligned with near-military precision. Victor Sandoval, regarded as one of Denver's most ruthless corporate attorneys, commanded respect from the very first second. Impeccable suit, sharp gaze, and a smile so controlled it made you instinctively check whether your wallet was still in your pocket. "Adrian," he said as he sat across from me, with the tone of a general before battle. "Sophia gave me a summary, but I need every detail, every mistake, every questionable decision, and every irregularity Carter Delgado has committed. We're going to dismantle them completely." Sophia Kim, seated beside him, opened her laptop and rubbed her fingers together like a pianist about to perform on a grand stage. "Get ready, Victor," she said with a sharp smile. "You're going to love what I found." For the next 3 hours, I witnessed Sophia's almost artistic talent. She had thoroughly investigated Carter and Marisol's businesses over the past week, and each revelation outdid the last. It was like discovering that your favorite restaurant actually served roadside meat disguised as fine dining. "Let's start with the basics," Sophia announced, displaying bank statements. "Carter has been funneling resources from Harrison Tech into a company called Green Evasons, LLC. "And who's the primary shareholder?" she asked, barely hiding the irony. I didn't have to think. My stomach knew before my mind did. "Marisol," Victor replied, leaning toward the screen with obvious interest. "Exactly. And this is just the beginning." Sophia pulled up more documents, each more damning than the last. Green Evasons supposedly focused on advanced logistics software development. Far too familiar. And for good reason. It was my software. The artificial intelligence I had worked on for 3 years. The same one Jordan Cortez had just acquired for $25 million. My pulse quickened. "They're bastards," I muttered, anger rising in my chest. "You haven't seen the best part yet," Sophia replied. "Victor, remember when you asked about questionable decisions? Carter had been manipulating Harrison Tech's intellectual property agreements to make it appear as though my technology had been developed using company resources. But the truth was very different. I had every file backed up, timestamps, versions, and cloud backups proving I built it myself, at home, during nights and weekends. I showed the backups to Victor. His expression was that of someone who had just found buried treasure. "This is perfect," he said. "Fraud, conspiracy, and intellectual property theft, solidly documented." But there was still more. Sophia opened an email chain that made me clench my fists. Carter had been sharing confidential information with Marisol for months. Financial reports, employee data, and even detailed updates on my project. In those messages, they analyzed my progress and setbacks as if they were their own. It was clear they had been planning this for a long time. It was as if they had dissected every aspect of my professional life, and part of my personal life, with the cold detachment of lab researchers. Everything was there, exposed, archived, and analyzed without my knowledge. Sophia pointed to a specific email from 3 months earlier. "Look at this." She zoomed in. Carter had written to Marisol. "Adrian is about to finish developing the AI. We need to move the plan forward. The patent application should be ready next week." My blood ran cold. Patent application. There it was. The confirmation of what I had always feared. They were preparing to register my work under Green Evasons and cut me out completely, without a shred of remorse. "And this," Sophia added, opening another email, "is from Marisol to Carter. He won't recover from this. Once we have the technology and he's out of the way, we can move forward without complications." This wasn't a lapse in judgment or an impulsive affair. It was a meticulously planned conspiracy, with clear steps designed to erase me professionally and destroy my reputation. I felt the ground vanish beneath my feet. While I struggled to process it, Victor took notes at the speed of someone who had just struck legal gold. His pens moved as if he were composing a symphony of lawsuits. "This is excellent," he said without looking up, "but I need more: financial statements, communication logs, anything that shows a systematic pattern of deception." "I'm ahead of you," Sophia replied, loading another folder packed with data. "I have months of financial movements." Carter had been using Harrison Tech's corporate credit cards for personal expenses, dinners with Marisol, hotels, jewelry, including the diamond necklace she had worn at the party. Victor added misappropriation of corporate funds to his growing list and clicked his tongue with satisfaction. And there's still more, Sophia continued, almost theatrically. Carter also falsified expense reports. He claimed business trips that never happened, the supposed Napa Valley conference that never existed, the so-called Austin Tech Summit that was really a romantic spa weekend, everything paid for with shareholder money. The more I heard, the tighter my stomach became. How long has this been going on? I finally asked. Based on the dates, at least 18 months. Possibly more, Sophia replied sympathetically. I'm sorry, Adrian. They've been moving pieces behind your back for a long time. 18 months. All that time, I had been working late into the night, sacrificing my personal life, convinced I was building a project that would define our future. Meanwhile, Carter and Marisol had been preparing my downfall with surgical precision. There's more, Sophia added, this time with a more serious tone. I found the original timeline for the day they planned to fire you. It was supposed to happen right after the meeting with Meet Fear, once they secured the license using your technology. Victor frowned. And what changed? Adrian moved first, she explained. When you wrote directly to Jordan Cortez, you blew their entire plan apart. That's why Carter was so unhinged at the party. He didn't just lose access to the technology. Months of preparation collapsed in a matter of seconds. Victor leaned back in his chair and laced his fingers together, like a satisfied villain who had just unraveled a conspiracy. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here isn't just adultery or corporate dishonesty. This is a full-scale conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, and intellectual property theft. We're going to win this case, but not just that. We're going to destroy them legally. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than rage or confusion. It wasn't naive hope, it was a cold, precise determination, backed by evidence and allies. What's the next step? I asked. Everything, Victor replied without hesitation. Civil lawsuits, criminal charges, ethics complaints. We're launching the full nuclear option. His smile was predatory in its purest form. Carter Delgado and Marisol Navarro are about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong person. Sophia snapped the laptop shut. They thought they were playing chess while you were playing checkers. But in reality, Adrian, we were all playing poker, and we just put a royal flush on the table. I left Victor's office with a drive I hadn't felt since the day I discovered Carter and Marisol's betrayal. They had treated me like a disposable piece, a replaceable element in their game of greed. It was time to show them just how wrong they were. Thursday morning, sitting in my small rented apartment, I watched the clock inch toward 10 with a mix of anxiety and almost electric anticipation. This was the day. The moment I had been waiting for. The official beginning of Carter and Marisol's downfall. Victor had spent the week preparing what he called a legal masterpiece, a package of lawsuits filed in Denver District Court, including corporate fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, intellectual property theft, and a dozen more charges that would have made even a mob lawyer smile. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. They had no idea what was coming. The notifications were strategically timed so the blow would land at the worst possible moment, and in front of the largest possible audience. At 10:15 a.m., my phone vibrated. A message from Sophia. The Eagle has landed. Repeat, the Eagle has landed. Tony, the process server, a guy who looked like he could lift a car with his bare hands, had just delivered the documents to Carter and Marisol at the Ritz-Carlton, where they were celebrating what the society pages described as an intimate engagement brunch with family and close friends. Intimate, sure. Just 24 of Denver's most influential gossips. The perfect setting to maximize public humiliation. Sophia had discovered the event thanks to Marisol's Instagram stories, where she'd been sharing every detail of her perfect romance for hours. Photos of the table, absurdly expensive mimosas, and a selfie with Carter captioned, "Living my best life with my best man." Yeah. Well, her best life was about to take a direct hit. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Victor's voice carried an almost musical satisfaction. Adrian, in 30 years of practice, I've never heard screams like those. Screams? I asked. Oh yes. According to Tony, Patricia Navarro's reaction could be heard from the lobby 3 floors below. I couldn't help but laugh. Patricia, famous for treating volume as a display of power, had finally found something worthy of a full-blown shriek. And Carter and Marisol? I asked. Carter turned white as a sheet and started hyperventilating. Marisol threw her mimosa at the waiter, missed, and ended up drenching Henry Navarro in champagne and orange juice. The mental image almost made me feel sorry for them. Almost. And the best part, Victor added, is that half the social elite witnessed the spectacle. The initial silence, the whispers afterward. The rumor mill must already be spinning through every private club in town. There was something darkly perfect about the way high society enjoyed watching reputations collapse. This time, the show had been served on a silver platter. Have they called? I asked. Carter's tried 3 times already. My assistant told him I'm in hearings all day. Let them panic. Desperate people make mistakes. An hour later, Sophia called again. Adrian, you have to see this. Marisol is having a complete meltdown on social media. I opened her Instagram, and it was like watching a train wreck in real time. The woman who normally posted carefully curated photos projecting a flawless life was now uploading story after story filled with rage, chaos, and barely coherent thoughts. In one, over a restaurant table covered in scattered documents, she wrote, "This is harassment. My lawyers will destroy whoever is behind this." In another, she appeared crying in the back seat of an Uber, mascara running down her face like black ink. Some people can't stand seeing others succeed and will do anything to drag you down. But the absolute gem was a clearly alcohol-fueled video, shot from an unflattering angle, in what looked like the Navarro family wine cellar. Completely uninhibited, she slurred. Adrian Reyes is a pathetic loser who can't accept that I found something better. Carter is twice the man he'll ever be. When I showed it to Sophia, her reaction was instant. She's losing control, and it's perfect. She's generating evidence in our favor without us lifting a finger. What do you mean? I asked. Defamation, Adrian. Every post adds another charge. And that drunk video. The jury is going to eat it alive. The afternoon still had even better news in store. Jordan Cortez contacted me personally to inform me that Harrison Sonk, now completely cornered, had tried to repair their relationship with Met Pair. They're in full panic mode, he told me in the tone of someone who genuinely enjoys watching others dig their own graves. Carter called your office 4 times demanding to speak with you to do damage control. Your assistant told him you weren't available. And what did they offer? I asked. Exclusive licensing rights, reduced fees. They even proposed hiring Carter as a consultant on the project. Jordan laughed. The desperation is so obvious it's almost embarrassing. And what did you tell them? That Met Corporation doesn't partner with companies under federal investigation. It seemed like the most sensible response. That night, I received another unexpected call. Henry Navarro. The same man who had treated me like trash just days earlier now sounded like someone negotiating his own release. Adrian, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We can resolve this in a civilized way. Civilized? I repeated, savoring the irony. Like when you said I deserved what happened to me, or that I wasn't good enough for your daughter. No, Henry, listen carefully. Your daughter and her boyfriend committed serious crimes. They stole my intellectual property, defrauded their company, and conspired to destroy my career. The only misunderstanding here is that they thought I would accept all of that without fighting back. This will ruin Marisol's reputation, he insisted. Marisol ruined her reputation when she decided to sleep with my boss in my own bed. I'm just making sure the world knows what they did. I hung up mid-sentence. It was almost as satisfying as signing that $25 million contract. The last call of the day came from Carter Delgado. He tried to sound confident, but fear leaked from his voice like boiling oil. Adrian, this is absurd. We both know you're acting out of spite. We can reach a reasonable agreement if you withdraw the lawsuit." I nearly choked with laughter. An agreement? Carter, you're facing between 5 and 10 years in federal prison. What exactly do you think you have to negotiate with? You don't have real evidence. You're bluffing. Oh, sure. Bank records, emails, falsified reports, documentation of intellectual property theft, and about 30 witnesses. Yes, total bluff. There was a silence so deep on the other end that I thought the call had dropped. "Still there, Carter?" "This isn't over," he finally said, his voice trembling, like a teenager trying to sound threatening. "You're right," I replied. "It's not over. It's just beginning." I hung up and looked around my small, worn-down apartment. That day, I understood that something had changed forever. I was no longer the victim. I had evidence, allies, and a multi-million-dollar contract. And the next day, the truly interesting part would begin. The 6 weeks flew by, and finally the big day arrived, the hearing. There was no dramatic soundtrack like in the movies, but the absolute silence inside Judge Gabriela Ruiz's courtroom carried an intensity no composer could ever match. The Denver District Court was packed, more crowded than a subway car at rush hour. It seemed the public enjoyed watching two wealthy elites fall more than any Netflix premiere. News cameras occupied one corner of the room as if it were a major media event. Judge Ruiz commanded respect the moment you saw her. 2 decades on the bench, famous for tolerating no-nonsense and dismantling white-collar criminals with a single look. At the defense table sat Carter Delgado and Marisol Navarro, dressed as if attending their own funeral. He wore an outrageously expensive suit but had the dark circles of a man who hadn't slept in weeks. She had chosen an angelic look, minimal makeup and all-white clothing, though it did nothing to hide the looks of pure hatred she kept shooting in my direction. Their legal team, though expensive, reeked of desperation. 3 nearly identical lawyers flipping through documents as if a miracle escape might appear at any moment. In contrast, Victor Sandoval, my attorney, radiated the calm of someone who had spent months preparing every piece of the puzzle. Everything was meticulously organized, evidence, witnesses, and a strategy so precise it resembled a Swiss watch. Behind us, Sophia Kim reviewed her laptop, ready to intervene, wearing a smile that looked like she was celebrating Christmas early. Victor stood. "Your Honor," he said with absolute confidence, "what we have here is not a simple case of corporate fraud. This is a deliberate conspiracy spanning 18 months, involving intellectual property theft, embezzlement of funds, and a systematic campaign to destroy my client's career and reputation." And with that, the real spectacle began. Carter Delgado approached the witness stand with almost theatrical confidence, as if he were about to deliver the most important presentation of his life. His walk was calculated, deliberate, each step designed to project absolute control. In his hand, he held the first piece of evidence, the original contract I had signed with Jordan Cortez, the agreement that had set everything in motion. He raised it slowly, making sure every juror could see it before speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began in a firm, perfectly projected voice, "what you see before you is a contract valued at $25 million. This document represents a technology the defendants attempted to appropriate deliberately. We are not talking about a loan, a negotiation, or a licensing agreement. We are talking about theft, in its purest form." The room fell silent. The 12 jurors watched him with the attention of people listening to a story capable of reshaping how they saw the world. They were ordinary people, workers, parents, citizens who understood the value of an honest paycheck. To them, watching millionaires try to justify why they believed they were entitled to something that wasn't theirs felt almost like a personal insult. On many faces, a mix of contained outrage and uneasy curiosity was visible. The jury foreman, a broad man with thick hands, clearly someone who had worked manual labor his entire life, took notes with absolute focus, leaning forward, following every word as if it were critical. When Carter's defense attorney stood to deliver his opening statement, the strain was unmistakable. His rigid posture and tense shoulders betrayed a man forced to defend the indefensible. His speech tried to disguise insecurity with rehearsed phrases. My clients are the victims of a vengeful ex-husband, incapable of accepting the end of his marriage. Mr. Adrian Reyes is using this court as an instrument of personal revenge. He had barely finished when Victor Sandoval intervened with the calm of someone who had seen that trick far too many times. Objection. Does counsel intend to address the documented evidence of embezzlement, or is he planning to reduce this entire case to a matter of hurt feelings? Judge Gabriela Ruiz raised an eyebrow and replied in a dry, firm tone. Counsel will confine himself to the facts. That was the first clear sign that the defense was beginning to lose solid ground. From that moment on, Victor took control of the courtroom like a conductor standing before a perfectly tuned orchestra. Every document he introduced reinforced the narrative, building a case that was solid and impossible to ignore. Bank statements revealed money transfers from Harrison Tech to a shell company registered under Marisol's name. Emails showed detailed discussions about exploiting the project before I could finish it. Expense reports painted a shameless picture of how Carter used corporate funds to finance romantic trips with her, behind everyone's backs. But nothing prepared those present for the moment Victor called Jordan Cortez to the stand. Jordan entered the courtroom as if he were walking a red carpet. He carried the intimidating presence of someone accustomed to moving absurd amounts of money. He settled into the witness chair as though he were at a casual meeting, not a high-profile trial. When Victor began the examination, the entire room leaned forward slightly. Mr. Cortez, in your professional opinion, what is the estimated value of the technology developed by Mr. Reyes? Jordan interlaced his fingers and answered in a relaxed, almost academic tone. A conservative estimate would be $50 million over the next 5 years. But more important than its immediate value is its potential to become an essential tool for entire industries. Its impact could reorganize global logistics in ways we're still processing. The jury's reaction was immediate. Widened eyes, barely contained murmurs, raised eyebrows. Victor continued. Did any representative from Harrison Tech contact you to negotiate the use of this technology? Jordan's smile was a weapon in itself. On multiple occasions. Mr. Delgado called my office 17 times in 2 weeks after I signed the contract with Mr. Reyes. He seemed quite anxious. A nearly imperceptible ripple of laughter moved through the gallery, but the judge struck the gavel once, reminding everyone they weren't there for entertainment. Then it was Marisol's turn. She had been meticulously prepared by her legal team. Subdued clothing, a mournful expression, an elegant handkerchief in her hand. She was trying to project vulnerability. But anyone who truly knew her could see the artificial effort behind the facade. The way she adjusted her hair, the calculated movement of her lips, everything was performative. Victor began by letting her speak. He allowed her to describe her marriage as an empty, emotionally distant relationship in which, according to her, I had neglected her to the point of pushing her to seek affection from Carter. It was a convenient story, designed to elicit sympathy. Then Victor changed course. Mrs. Navarro, you stated that your relationship with Mr. Delgado began because you felt ignored by your husband. Is that correct? She nodded, dabbing at a tear that looked rehearsed in front of a mirror. Yes. Adrian was always working. Carter gave me the attention I lacked. I see, Victor replied. Then could you tell us when you first learned about the artificial intelligence project your husband was working on? She frowned. I'm not sure. Victor didn't let her finish. He handed her a printed email. This is a message you sent to Mr. Delgado 14 months ago. Could you read the highlighted portion? When Marisol lowered her eyes and saw the text, the color drained from her face. It was as if the blood had left it entirely. This is out of context. Read it aloud, Victor ordered firmly. With a trembling voice, she read. AI Project, Delaware. Adrian is progressing faster than expected. We need to accelerate the process for the patent application. The impact was immediate. Murmurs exchanged glances among the jurors. Even one of the reporters froze completely. Victor delivered the final blow. This message is dated 6 months before the start of your alleged romance with Mr. Delgado. How do you explain discussing patent applications for work that belonged to your husband before you even began a relationship with a man who, according to you, would later file those same applications? She tried to stammer an answer, but Victor didn't let her escape. What this demonstrates, Mrs. Navarro, is a conspiracy. It shows that you and Mr. Delgado planned this from the beginning. That your marriage was nothing more than a tool to commit industrial espionage. Then Marisol snapped. She stood up and shouted, overwhelmed by frustration and rage. You don't understand. Adrian was nobody, just a nobody trapped in a cubicle with no future. Carter offered me something real. I deserved more than a loser who couldn't even take me to a decent restaurant. The courtroom froze. The judge slammed the gavel hard. Mrs. Navarro, if you do not control yourself, I will hold you in contempt. But the damage was already done. She had admitted, in front of a jury and television cameras, that she married me out of convenience and conspired to steal my work because I wasn't enough. The air grew so heavy it felt tangible. Victor didn't need to add much more. His glance at the jury was the equivalent of a period at the end of a sentence. Then came the moment to play the audio obtained by Sophia Kim, a recording in which Marisol and Carter mocked me in a cafe, boasting about how they had crushed my future and celebrating that I would never recover. The jury transformed. Their expressions hardened into stone. The defense tried to react, but the bell had already rung. There was no going back. Carter finally took the stand after all of that, attempting to project professionalism, claiming it had all been nothing more than business decisions that had been misunderstood. But after Marisol's spectacle, Carter sounded like a man desperately trying to convince everyone that fire doesn't burn. When the closing arguments ended, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Solidity, an inner strength I barely recognized. I was no longer the betrayed husband or the humiliated man. I was someone who had defended his work, his dignity, and his name. The jury took only 47 minutes to deliberate, not even enough time to order lunch. When they returned, the foreperson stood with a conviction that made the outcome feel inevitable. In the case of Reyes versus Delgado and Navarro, he announced in a grave voice, this is the verdict. The decision landed with almost physical force. The jury found in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. That single sentence transformed the courtroom into absolute silence, so dense it felt as though even breathing was forbidden. For me, it was like watching justice finally balance the scales after months of abuse, betrayal, and manipulation. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was the cleanest possible blow against those who had gambled everything on destroying me. The foreperson held the document as if it were a sacred text. No one moved. You could have heard a pin drop in the building's parking lot. Across from me, Carter Delgado looked on the verge of fainting. His face was so pale it seemed he was fighting nausea. Beside him, Marisol, my soon-to-be ex-wife, clutched the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles had gone completely white. Even their expensive legal team lowered their gaze, as if reconsidering their own professional futures. Judge Gabriela Ruiz adjusted her glasses with the calculated calm of someone who knew she was about to deliver a devastating sentence. Defendants, please stand to hear the sentencing, she ordered. Carter and Marisol rose slowly, trembling, as if walking toward their own execution. Their attorney tried to whisper something, but the judge silenced him with a single look, one that could have frozen hell itself. She took a deep breath before speaking. Mr. Delgado, you have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement of corporate funds, theft of intellectual property, and breach of fiduciary duty. These crimes severely damage corporate ethics and represent a direct betrayal of the trust placed in individuals in leadership positions. Carter swayed, his body seemingly unable to bear the weight of each word. You held a position of responsibility, the judge continued, and you abused that power to defraud your employer and deliberately destroy Mr. Reyes's career for personal gain. Therefore, this court sentences you to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. The impact was devastating. His knees nearly buckled, and his attorney had to grab him to keep him from collapsing. But the worst was still to come. Additionally, the judge added, you are ordered to pay $250,000 in restitution to Harrison Tech and an additional $500,000 to Mr. Adrian Reyes in punitive damages. The press, which had held its murmurs all morning, erupted into a chorus of whispers. Several reporters typed frantically. In less than a minute, Carter went from corporate executive to ruined criminal. The judge then turned to Marisol. The severity of her gaze was almost tangible. Mrs. Navarro, your involvement in this conspiracy is particularly disturbing. You exploited the bond of marriage to spy on your husband, handed over private information, and actively participated in the theft of intellectual property. You violated the most basic form of trust that can exist between two people, marriage. Marisol was crying, but this time the tears were not rehearsed for manipulation. They were real, those of someone watching her world collapse beyond repair. For your actions, you are sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. Additionally, you are ordered to pay $500,000 to Mr. Reyes for the damages caused. My ex-wife, the same woman who had boasted that I would never recover, now faced prison and financial ruin. And finally, the judge continued, both defendants are permanently barred from working in any area related to technological development or intellectual property management. They may not hold positions, consultancies, or roles involving the handling of sensitive information or trade secrets. That was the final blow. Carter lost his career forever. Marisol watched every plan built on ideas that never belonged to her evaporate instantly. But the judge was not finished. She turned to Marisol's parents, Henry and Patricia Navarro, who looked as though they wanted to vanish into their seats. Although you do not face criminal charges, the evidence demonstrates that you facilitated and financed this conspiracy. You are hereby ordered to pay $100,000 in civil damages for your complicity. Henry's gasp hung in the air. Patricia looked as if she might faint. It wasn't just the money, it was the public scandal that came with it. The judge struck the gavel and adjourned the session. Within seconds, the courtroom erupted into a whirlwind of cameras, flashes, and reporters. 2 federal marshals handcuffed Carter and Marisol and began escorting them out. Carter kept looking back, eyes wide, as if he still couldn't comprehend that it was all real. Marisol could barely walk, leaning on those around her as if her legs no longer worked. The woman who once moved among Denver's elite as if untouchable was now only hours away from trading her jewelry for an orange uniform. A few meters away, Victor Sandoval, my lead attorney, radiated satisfaction. He knew how to recognize a crushing victory, and this one was historic. Sophia Kim and other members of the legal team congratulated him, shaking hands. Victor spotted me in the crowd and, with an almost predatory smile, said, in 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything this decisive. We didn't just win, we destroyed them. The press conference outside the courthouse was surreal. Dozens of cameras, microphones pointed at me, journalists shouting questions. Mr. Reyes, how does it feel to see your wife and your former boss sentenced to federal prison? One asked. Ex-wife, I corrected, savoring the word. I filed for divorce this morning. And yes, it feels like justice. They thought they could crush me without consequences because they assumed I was weak. They were wrong. Today it was clear they were wrong. And what do you plan to do now? Another reporter asked. I looked out over the Denver skyline and thought about the new loft I had rented, the project I was building from scratch, and the team beginning to form around me. I'm going to keep creating. I've always innovated, and I will continue to do so. The difference is that now I'll be surrounded by people who don't try to sabotage me. That night, sitting in my new loft, I looked out over the city lights. 6 months ago, I had been living a lie, married to someone who was conspiring against me, working for a boss who stole my ideas, convinced I was building a solid life. Today, I was free, vindicated, and more financially secure than ever. But most importantly, I was surrounded by the right people. Sophia, Victor, Jordan Courts, and a brilliant team who saw potential in me, not weakness. My phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. Cheers to celebrate. You earned it. I grabbed my keys, closed the loft door, and felt something I hadn't in years, the true beginning of my life. I never imagined that Carter Delgado and Marisol could push me this far. Over time, I realized their betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had simply completed the forging of something I had been trying to awaken for years. After seeing them handcuffed and escorted by federal agents, I knew the truly important part was just beginning. Freedom has a particular scent. It smells like freshly painted walls, new leather on office chairs, and that expensive coffee you buy not to impress anyone, but because you can. That mixture greeted me as I entered my downtown Denver loft on a cold, bright Monday morning. 6 months ago, I had been living in a depressing apartment, eating cheap Chinese food, picking up the pieces of my life. Now I was in a spacious, modern space, floor-to-ceiling windows offering an impeccable view of the urban skyline. The wooden floor gleamed, and every corner reminded me that, for the first time in a long while, I was in control of my own destiny. Black Navastions had been running for 3 weeks, though now it was called Reyes Nevasons. I was still getting used to leaving my old surname behind, and to my surprise, we were already generating an impact beginning to reach all the way to Silicon Valley. Beside me was Sophia Kim, my co-founder and chief architect of the system, a woman capable of solving critical failures with the same unwavering confidence she used to confront anyone who got in our way. Nearby, Victor Sandoval, our general counsel, relished protecting a company born directly from the disaster caused by Carter Delgado's incompetence. And Jordan Courts, who had gone from business ally to indispensable strategic advisor, with a network so vast it opened doors I hadn't even known existed. But what truly drove us was something bigger than business. We were building a monument for everyone betrayed by those who had promised to support them. The Phoenix Initiative was born on a Tuesday, with the energy of an early Christmas mixed with 4th of July fireworks. It was an investment fund exclusively for creators and innovators whose projects had been stolen by family, partners, or bosses. We started with a solid but discreet amount. Yet once people learned our mission, applications poured in like a tidal wave. Among them were Mateo Valdez, a software engineer whose own brother stole his app idea and sold it to a major company. Sarah Nguyen, a biotech researcher betrayed by her lab partner who published her work under his own name before closing a multi-million-dollar contract, and David Herrera, a mechanical engineer whose father-in-law used family influence to patent his renewable energy design, erasing him from the process and taking all the credit. It was always the same story with different names, brilliant people betrayed by those who had vowed to support them. And the response they received was always the same condescending advice. Keep going, it's part of life. I no longer believed in that resigned philosophy. To us, betrayal wasn't the end of a chapter, it was the exact point where transformation could begin. We launched the event at the Denver Art Museum, a building so singular it looked like it had been designed by extraterrestrial architects with impeccable taste. Businesspeople, tech figures, investors, journalists, and experts from across the state attended. Many of them had seen me 6 months ago as a defeated man, a betrayed husband, a professional without direction. That day, none of that man remained. I looked out at the 500 people gathered, all watching the stage as I prepared to speak. They were listening not out of pity, but because they knew I was building something worth paying attention to. I began, letting my voice fill the room. I lost my job. My wife betrayed me. And her family had the audacity to tell me I didn't deserve to breathe the same air as their precious daughter. There were laughs. People love to see the powerful fall, but even more to see the humiliated rise. Today, I continued, those same people are in federal prison, financially ruined, and expelled from the industries they tried to use to destroy me. But this story isn't about revenge. It's about the courage we find when we stop letting others define our worth. On the screen appeared the Phoenix Initiative logo, wrapped in ascending flames. This organization exists because being betrayed is not a character flaw. It's an opportunity for a creator's rebirth. Our mission isn't to help people get over it. Our mission is to give them the tools to transform that harm into something far greater and more successful than what they lost. The ovation was immediate, intense, and vibrant. Still, It wasn't over. Our first round would fund 12 innovators who had been silenced, ignored, and discarded, people who refused to accept injustice as the final chapter of their stories. That day, we gave them the chance to build empires that would make those who betrayed them wish they had never touched them. The room erupted in applause. In every corner, people were writing, analyzing, calculating, imagining their own rebirth. During the reception, many approached to discuss metrics, processes, and long-term vision. But the conversation that truly mattered happened by the bar. A young woman approached, carrying the expression of someone who had already tasted desperation. "Mr. Reyes," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm Jennifer Molina. My partner stole my AI algorithm and my client list. Then he blocked me from all tech companies in Austin using his contacts. I've been fighting in court for 2 years. He has family money, and I'm alone." I handed her my card without hesitation. "Jennifer, send me everything. Patents, financial records, emails, court documents. Within 48 hours, one of our teams will review your case." Her eyes filled with tears. "Would you do this without knowing me?" "Of course," I replied. "I know exactly who you are. You trusted the wrong person, and now they're telling you to accept defeat. But you won't. You're going to fight, and we're going to help you win." At that moment, Sophia appeared beside me, holding her phone, smiling as if she had just discovered unlimited energy. "Adrian, look at this." It was an article on TechCrunch. Reyes Navasans raises $50 million in funding round, announces national expansion of the Phoenix Initiative. 50 million wasn't just a number. It was confirmation that we now had the resources to change hundreds of lives. Jordan Quartz arrived seconds later, impeccable in his tailored suit. "Adrian, congratulations. You've built something extraordinary." "We've built it," I corrected him. "None of this exists without you." "Perhaps," he said, raising his glass. "But only someone with your mix of talent and righteous fury could have led it. Most get stuck in bitterness. You turned it into momentum." When the event ended and the museum was nearly empty, I walked through the main hall, observing the remnants of the celebration. Empty glasses, forgotten business cards, murmurs still lingering in the air. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Saw the news. Congratulations on your success, Adrian. Even from prison, that wretch was trying to peek into my life." I deleted the message without thinking. Some ruins must remain ruins. I approached the windows and gazed at the city that had witnessed both my fall and my rise. Somewhere in a cell, Marisol was surely wondering how the man she once called pathetic was now on magazine covers, while she counted the days until her parole. But I no longer thought of her, nor Carter, nor anyone who had tried to crush me. I thought of Jennifer, Mateo, Sarah, David, and the hundreds more whose stories were still waiting for justice. Passing by a mirror near the exit, I paused for a moment. The reflection showed the same features as always, but nothing else was the same. I was no longer the naive, trusting husband I once was. I was a different man. Firmer, sharper, relentless to those who would harm me, and infinitely more valuable to those who chose to walk by my side. I am Adrian Reyes. I am free. I am enough. And they will never erase me again. The elevator doors closed, carrying me straight toward whatever came next. If you've ever been betrayed and told you weren't enough, this story is for you. Like, share, and follow the channel. Sometimes, the real beginning comes after hitting rock bottom.